Hey young friends, Dr. Bill here. I certainly hope that you're thawed out and warmed up after the last couple of weeks of really cold temperatures and ice and snow. You may recall that in our last session together, we started talking about the disciples. And in that last session, we focused on Simon, who was also known as Peter. Well, today we're going to focus on two brothers, James and John, who were known as the sons of Zebedee. Like Peter, James and John were fishermen, but apparently their father and their family did very well in the fishing business because Zebedee owned his own boat. Well, when Jesus walked beside the sea and saw James and John, he called them and said, "I want you to follow me. I want you to come after me." And James and John didn't think twice. They hopped out of the boat and they went and followed Jesus. It's important to note they left their family behind. They left their father, Zebedee. And as well, they left some measure of security. They abandoned the trade of fishing, something that they knew very, very well. Well, along with Peter, James and John formed a very close circle of friends with Jesus. These three, Peter, James, and John, were on hand to witness things that the other disciples never got to see. For example, there's a story when there was a little girl who had died, and Jesus went to their house, and the disciples waited outside, but Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him inside the house, and they watched as Jesus raised this little girl from the dead. And then later on in the Gospels, we're told that when Jesus went up to the top of a high mountain, he took Peter, James, and John with him. And in that moment, Jesus was transfigured. His appearance was changed. It was sort of a preview of what Jesus would look like when he was raised from the dead. The other disciples did not get to witness that. And then finally, when Jesus was approaching his crucifixion, he retired to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray, to kind of get himself centered, to talk to God about his fears and everything. And so doing, Jesus invited Peter, James, and John to go with him. And even though Jesus went off a little way and prayed by himself, Jesus nevertheless wanted these three friends to be close to him in his hour of greatest need. By their presence, they would support and encourage them. Well, as I mentioned, like Simon, whom Jesus gave the nickname Peter, Rock, Jesus also gave James and John a nickname. Their nickname was the Sons of Thunder. The Sons of Thunder. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Jesus likely gave them this nickname because they were perhaps loud, but for sure they would often get hot and angry. We learn of one episode where Jesus sent James and John into a village to see if the village would welcome them, show them some hospitality. And so when they went and they said, "Hey, we'd like to come and stay, we might share meals with you, etc., etc." Well, the village said, "No, we don't want any part of you. We don't want you anywhere near us." Well, James and John turned around and left in a huff. And by the time they got back to Jesus, they were raging mad. They were so mad that they said to Jesus, "Please let us call down fire from heaven so that this village and all the people in it may be destroyed." Well, Jesus rebuked them. And Jesus, in so doing, gave us an indirect lesson. That's important for us to know when to get angry and what to get angry about. And for sure, Jesus was trying to say we don't want our anger to cause us to hurt others. We don't want our anger to control our lives. And then as well, as Jesus made his way to Jerusalem, they were on the road to Jerusalem, James and John kind of pulled Peter aside and said, "Look, we have something we want to ask you. There's something we want you to do for us." And Jesus said, "I'll grant it if I can." And They said, when you come into your kingdom, we want to have the seats on your left hand and on your right hand. In other words, they envisioned that when Jesus got to Jerusalem, he would ascend to a throne, he would be given a crown, and he would be a king like King David. He would drive out the Romans, and the people of Israel would all be united. And they wanted to be in the places of prominence and power. Well, ambition is a good thing. But on this occasion, Jesus told them, you've misunderstood the whole point. You've misunderstood about what I am about, what my mission is. And he said, besides, these 2 seats are not for me to give. That's reserved for God. Now, no doubt, when the other disciples heard what James and John had asked, they got angry at them. And perhaps James and John got angry back at them. We don't know for sure. But the idea is that they overstepped their bounds. They didn't understand what Jesus was about, and they asked for something that they surely weren't equipped to handle. Well, as we walk through the lives of James and John, we learn a couple of important lessons. Here's one. Even though we follow Jesus, we don't always get things right. James and John left everything behind to follow Jesus. They were part of his inner circle. They saw things others never saw. And yet they continually misunderstood what Jesus was about. And so even though they were close to Jesus, they still didn't get it all right all the time. And that's true for us. Following Jesus is a hard thing. And sometimes we're on it. We got it. Other times we fall short. And as well, we learn in this instance that it's very, very important for us to see ourselves correctly, to understand that we are made of flesh and blood, and we're like every other person on this planet. And so instead of asking if we could have glory and the chief seats, be the star of the show, perhaps we should ask, let me play my role. Let me do what I'm supposed to do. I don't need to ask you to do something special for me. Well, that's it for today. And as always, I invite you to reach out if you have questions of any kind. You certainly know by now how to get in touch with me. So for today, I wish you well and pray God's blessings on all of you. Take care. Goodbye.